Story time about how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad is an absolute DILF. He used to be a competitive bodybuilder and even did some modeling back in the day. Well, let's just say my boyfriend didn't turn out with the same looks. Don't get me wrong, my boyfriend is really sweet, but he's not the best looking guy. One of the reasons we started dating and I really liked him was because of how considerate and loving he was. We started off as friends and he would take me out to dinner, wine and dine me, eventually asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. We both come from wealthy families, and our families loved the idea of us being together. Exactly a year ago, we moved in together, and he got a new job that required him to travel a lot. Well, he asked his dad to come check on me. So his dad would come over, we would watch movies, and just hang out. But one night we decided to do some drinking. I got super tipsy, and so did he. One thing led to another, and we ended up, And after that, we did it over and over. Of course, my boyfriend's dad felt super guilty, and so did I. I mean, he was cheating on his wife with me, and I was cheating on his son with him. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After my boyfriend's dad and I had hooked up a couple of times, of course, he felt really guilty, and so did I. We decided to end things cordially and never tell anyone about it. Fast forward to when my boyfriend comes home from his work trip. I had to pretend like nothing happened, but it was really hard because at this point I definitely caught feelings for my boyfriend's dad. I became really distant from my boyfriend and he started noticing. He also asked me one day if his dad came over to check up on me, which I said yes. After that, things were just not the same between my boyfriend and I. He would always ask me why I never touched him or kissed him, and I would just say that I felt bad or that I had my period. A month later, my boyfriend goes on another work trip. My boyfriend even invited me to come on the work trip, but I said no. Instead, as soon as he left, I called his dad and told him to come over. I told him I just wanted to talk, but really, His dad came over, we talked for about an hour, and then it happened again. It's like we just couldn't help ourselves. That's when he told me that he was catching feelings for me and that maybe even wanted to get a divorce. Part 3 is Part 3 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad tells me that he wants to get a divorce from his wife because he's catching feelings for me. He even suggested that we could move away to another town. And yes, at this point, I had totally fallen for him too. But at the same time, I still had a relationship with his son. But to be honest with you guys, I didn't have the guts to tell my boyfriend that I loved his dad. Since my boyfriend was still on the work trip, his dad would come over almost every single day. His wife, aka my mother-in-law, didn't even notice that she was coming over to my place. She thought he was at work and at the gym. We are now fully in love. My boyfriend came back from his work trip and of course, I was still distant. A few days later, he asked me what was wrong and I just don't know what to tell him. His dad told me to keep quiet for now because he wants to figure out what to do. I don't want to end a marriage and I know I don't want to break my boyfriend's heart. But at the same time, I am in love with his dad. I know you guys are going to think I'm a terrible person, but I genuinely need your advice. What do you guys think I should do? Should I be honest with my boyfriend?
I think my daughter is trying to marry her grandfather. So it was my daughter's 18th birthday and she was finally a legal adult. She was always going to be my baby in my eyes, of course. We gave her a big birthday and everything was fine. Her grandfather and father came to celebrate as well. Even though her father and I are divorced, I still wanted him to be in her life. Me and him just didn't work out. Nothing to do with my daughter. Let's call her Rachel. So I looked across the room and I saw her and her grandfather talking. He ended up giving her a gift and she gave him the biggest kiss on the cheek and hugged him for a long time. I thought this was cute that her and her grandfather were getting along, but I didn't realize this would soon be the start of stuff I didn't like. So one day Rachel said she was going out on a date and her grandfather was going to bring her. I said okay. She went out into the car and left with him. When she got back home, her grandfather dropped her off again. I was kind of confused because I'd expect the date to drop her off, but I guess not. I asked her about it and she said she just likes spending time with her grandfather. One day I overheard her talking on the phone with her girls about the guy she's seeing. She was saying how he got her the prettiest necklace even for her birthday. I was confused because I didn't know her date would be at the party, but there was a lot of people there. Then I got a knock on the door and you will not believe who it was. So the next day I got a knock on the door and it was her grandfather. Again. I asked what he was doing here and he said that she and him were going on a grandfather-granddaughter date. I said, again? He said, yeah, what's the problem? So she came downstairs looking really pretty and greeted him with a kiss on the cheek again. I was kind of weirded out by this, but I let it slide. Maybe I just wasn't as affectionate with him. So I waved them goodbye and saw them drive off. Hours later, I was wondering who this special guy was. So I went into her room and looked into her diary. I opened a couple of pages until I read one that was talking about the mystery guy. She claimed he had a Volkswagen, his favorite color was blue, he loved 60s music and was rich. I was confused because this sounded a lot like her father's dad. Before I could flip the next page, I heard a car pull up outside. I went downstairs and it was him and her. She hugged him goodbye and went upstairs. Maybe I was overreacting a little bit. I decided I would talk about the concerns for family dinner tomorrow. The next day, everything was fine. We were eating our dinner per usual until I saw an engagement ring on my daughter's finger. I asked her what it was and you will not believe what happens next. Come back for part 3. I decided I was going to talk about it at our family dinner. So the day of the dinner, we were all sitting and eating and I said I wanted to talk. I looked at Rachel's hand and saw a ring. I asked her what that was there for, and she said she wanted to leave this for later, but she shouted, "I'm getting engaged!" We all looked in shock, but we all congratulated her and asked who it was. She looked at her grandfather and smiled, I kid you not. She said that she would wait for the day of the wedding because she didn't want anyone to judge her. I was confused because I didn't know what to do or say. We all looked in shock, and there was just like a wave of silence for a good 1 minute. And then all I heard was shouting and screaming. They all found this outrageous and said we should be able to meet someone before you marry them in case they have bad vibes. She said she wanted to do it non-traditionally because she claimed she was going to marry him regardless. We finished the dinner, and I don't know if I'm bugging or overreacting, but I feel like she's trying to marry her grandfather, and I don't know how to address it. Is this right or wrong morally? They aren't by blood. Let me know in the comments down below. Follow for more story time. I broke up my best friend and her boyfriend out of jealousy. So, I've been best friends with Brittany my whole life, and I've always been compared to her. I was a nerdy redhead, and she was a beautiful blonde with a perfect body. She was the prettiest girl in my class, and I was jealous, but she was a good person. So, when we were in high school, I got a little pretty, but she got prettier, and we expanded our friend group. We had 2 friends, Selena and Janiyah. Selena was gorgeous and Janiyah as well, so I was the ugly duff in this friendship. One day, there was this new kid who just transferred, and he was so cute. His name was Aaron. He has blue eyes, blonde hair, and tan skin. He had abs, and he was tall. He had the same class with me, so I ended up talking to him first, and we became friends. I started to genuinely like him. It was obvious I liked him, but never stated it. Then Brittany started flirting with him in front of me, and they managed to get together somehow. I figured I could become best friends with Aaron and swoon him my way, so I brought up the idea to Brittany of being best friends, and she didn't have a problem with it. So I got Aaron's snap, and I made sure we snapped every day. And you will not believe what we sent each other on Snapchat. Come back for part 2. Some flirty pictures, and he would as well. I sent a pic in a lower cut shirt, and he sent a pic shirtless. We would hang out by ourselves sometimes and play fight. I asked him why he's dating Brittany. He said because she's hot. But I asked him if he genuinely liked her. He paused, then said yeah. I didn't believe him. One day, I went over to Brittany's house to hang, and Brittany was talking about an exposed page and laughing at some girls she didn't like. Their blanks were up and some off-guard funny photos. Then she took blank pictures in front of us and sent them to Aaron. Then he sent some back. She showed us, but I looked away out of respect. I was jealous. Her pictures looked good. But then I got the perfect idea again. This would for sure break them up. So one day, I asked Aaron if we could share fingerprints with each other, as a best friend thing, and we did. I asked him if he did it with anyone else, and he said a couple of his guy friends. I waited until a week, and I went to one of his soccer games, and he had to take a shower. So I walked with him to his house and waited for him to shower to look through his phone. I airdropped both of their blank photos to my phone, and then I took screenshots of their conversation with them flirting and such, and airdropped those as well. I set his phone down, and he came back, and then we continued to hang. He said he trusted me, and I was happy. I def had a chance with him. Then I went home, and you will not believe what I did. Come back for part 2. I photoshopped the flirting text to make it look like someone else was flirting with him. I made the name Victoria with some heart emojis. I then waited a week, and Brittany and Aaron were having some issues actually. This was my perfect moment. I made a fake account and I contacted the exposed page saying I have some juicy things. I sent out Aaron's blanks, Brittany's blanks, and the fake text messages I photoshopped. I then logged out of the account and deleted it completely from my phone. I ended up getting a call from Brittany and she was freaking out. The girls were on call too. She was crying and saying he exposed her. Then Aaron called me and I put Brittany on hold. Aaron was mad because he thought Brittany exposed his blanks and he said this sucked. They both suspected me at some point, but I showed them that the only Instagram account I have is mine. I promised them I didn't do it, and they bought it. They ended up breaking up and this was finally my chance. So I asked Aaron out, and he accepted. I told Brittany and she didn't like it, so she cut me off and I stayed with him. I actually gained some new friends and felt like myself. I know that what I did was wrong, but I got the boy I wanted and finally felt comfortable for once. Me and Aaron have been together 2 years strong, and they don't know I was the cause of their breakup till this day. Follow for more story times. My therapist took advantage of me without me realizing it. So it was my sophomore year of high school, and recently I just lost my father. I didn't have any other man figure in my life since my father was the only one and my family was full of girls. My sisters and mother noticed I was becoming more depressed, so they recommended that I go to therapy. I really didn't want to because I didn't find it beneficial and I had a bad feeling about it, but I went anyways. So when I got there, we were asked the questions, I got my personal info, all that jazz. They basically did a reevaluation. They told us to come back next week to actually meet with a doctor to see if I wanted him or not. And so we did. So we'll call him Dr. Stewart. Dr. Stewart was really kind and gentle. He reminded me of my dad. I decided that I chose him to be my therapist since I met 3. He was really understanding and he was really nice. I actually didn't regret going to therapy at this point. He also said I was pretty, which no one really ever said to me before. He comforted me while I was crying, and midway of me crying, he ended up laughing. I was confused and stepped back, but you will not believe what he said next. Come back for part 2. I ended up looking up confused, and what he said next really set me back and shocked me a bit. He said I looked cute when I was crying and apologized for laughing. I said it was fine, and I said thanks, but I was still confused. After that, we continued talking more and the session ended. The next session, he asked me if I've ever done anything to hurt myself since there are other healthier ways to go about it. I showed him marks on my arm because I trusted him, and he touched them and said that they were beautiful scars and they are part of me now. But I shouldn't intentionally hurt myself again. I was confused but also flattered. We continued talking and we found healthier ways to release stress, and we were both satisfied. When our session was over, I was kind of sad and said, I wish I could talk to you whenever and not just on scheduled days. He then wrote on a piece of paper and gave me his number and said to keep it a secret since this wasn't professional. He said if I needed any more time to talk, just call him up or text him. I promised to keep it a secret. One day, I felt a bad wave of depression and texted him. I asked if I could see him because I needed someone to talk to, and he agreed. So I ended up taking the bus to his house. And when I got there, you will not believe what happens next. Come back for part 3.
So I asked if I could see him, and he said that I could as long as I kept it a secret. So I promised to keep it a secret. He ended up texting me his address, and I ended up taking the bus over there. He lived in an apartment complex. So I went through the building and went up to his front door and knocked, and he opened. He told me to come in, and it smelled really good in there. He gave me a hug and asked me what was wrong. I started crying and breaking down and just talking about my problems. He ended up giving me advice, and then out of nowhere, he said he was going to be right back. He went to his room and grabbed a box, and he handed the box for me. He said he had a gift for me. So I opened it, and it was this really pretty necklace. I told him thank you. Next thing you know, he ended up leaning in trying to kiss me. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, well, I thought this is what you came for. I looked at him in shock and said no. I ended up running out of the house and blocking his number. I told my mom that I wanted to change therapists, and I've never told anybody about this. Lesson learned, always keep things professional. Follow for more story times. I'm also releasing a business, so follow it. It's in the caption.
I've been doing things with my mother's husband, and I don't know what to do. So my mom married this guy, let's call him John. They married when I was 10 years old. He made her happy, and he was the perfect match for her. But something about him just didn't sit right with me. I never liked him, and it was only 2 years since my mother had moved on from my original father. My father had died from cancer, so obviously that was hard for me. I didn't really get the chance to heal at 10 years old, especially since I didn't know how to process my emotion. I was so young. And prepare myself for my mom to move on and find someone new to marry. John always tried to bond with me. He tried to play catch with me, play dollhouse, read stories to me, even try to bake with me. He went to extraordinary lengths, and I just wasn't having it. So one day, when I was 16, my mom called me at school. She told me that she was taking me on a shopping spree. I asked her, what's the limit? And she said $3K. I jumped for joy. She told me to take the bus to the mall and meet her in the food court. And so I did. I told her I loved her and that I'll be there soon. So I ended up arriving at the mall and went to the food court, but you will not believe who I saw there. Come back for part 2. I was so frustrated to find out it was John. I asked him, what are you doing here? He said, it's a way for us to spend time together and get to know each other since you haven't been trying for the past years. I was like, whatever, fine. We ended up going to his stores and actually having a lot of fun. Come back for part 2. After we finished, we ate. There was one moment where I looked him in the eye. I felt this weird tingle in my stomach, so I just looked back at my food and we continued to eat. Then we went to his car, locked eyes, kissed, and one thing led to another. We went back home as if nothing happened. I don't want to hurt my mom. Don't tell her I will, and if I do tell her I will. What should I do?
Ôi chị Tám hạnh phúc bên Phạm Út ư.